Hello and welcome to Study Notes. I am your host for this first episode of this new series, where we'll be talking about writing autistic characters, as it is in the time of this recording, Autism Awareness Month, or as it's more commonly called, Autism Acceptance Month. But I prefer Autism Awareness over acceptance because, frankly, it has a better connotation to it, But anyways, like I said, let's get. First things first. I'm sure you're wondering, who are you? Why is there a lizard man on the screen, and what's with the chat? So let's get to introductions. So first things first. Like I said, my name is Tommytoon. I'm a Vtuber. I've been a writer for most of my life, and importantly for this class, I am on the spectrum. Today I want to talk about autistic characters and how to write them in an effective way. Because to put it frankly, like making any other character, writing autistic characters isn't as simple as this thing plus another makes a good character. And throughout this course, I'm going to be talking about different aspects of being on the spectrum, pulling from research and my own experience, and of course, like what the disclaimer says, I am not an expert. I am just pulling from my own research and my own experiences. With that out of the way, let's get to it. So, first things first, what is autism? So autism, or autism spectrum disorder as it's more commonly known now, is a neurological disorder that affects about 1% of the world's population, about that number there. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of us out there. Maybe you yourself are on the spectrum or know someone who is. Autism is a neurological disorder that can affect people in a broad stroke of different ways, with some through lines being present. Common examples being trouble in social settings, heightened stimulation awareness/sensitivity, trouble with eye contact, and special interests. Autism as a disorder has a wide range of symptoms and configurations that affect everyone differently. But to simply put, autism is a rewiring of the brain that makes that the individual is neurodivergent, which basically means they perceive the world differently than the typical mind, which is often called neurotypical. Best way to think of it is basically think of an egg sandwich with two pieces of white bread and 2 eggs. While that is a standard neurotypical brain, but then when you start with autism, it begins to change things a bit. Like some on the spectrum, they may have 1 piece of white bread and a piece of wheat bread, or 3 eggs, 4 eggs, seasoned eggs. It's all variable. And while it is an egg sandwich, it is not the same exact egg sandwich, if that makes sense. So what makes a good autistic character? So now that we've established what autism is in its most basic elements, the question then becomes, what makes a good autistic character? Simple. Like with most things in writing, it's the execution of the elements in the character's traits. When it comes to autistic characters, there are elements such as symptoms, stimming, special interests to take into consideration. Whether the character is outright said to be autistic in the story or by you, the writer, it is ultimately your job as the writer to make sure it is represented well within the story. Ultimately, what I cover just scratches the surface and should not be used as your only source of research. Like with anything that involves this sort of thing, do your research. I cannot emphasize this enough. And when possible, talk with those who are on the spectrum to get their insight as well. General symptoms. With this, when it comes to those in the autism spectrum, we are much more susceptible to mental ailments and can exhibit unique symptoms tied to or related to the disorder. I mentioned some earlier, such as problem with eye contact, which is something I have trouble with, but it also can manifest as things like sensitivity to stimuli, including touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing. Smite. Yes, I have a sensitivity to smite. But no, a common problem, and all those are a common problem for those on the spectrum. Like for me, noises and certain foods and other things can be a big problem for me. Like, for example, the very feeling of Polaroid type photos, the type of photos you print out after taking a photo, the actual photo side of the photo is a huge problem for me. And even thinking about it can incur a lot of anxiety. And these And the physical symptoms can be as mild as an aversion to certain foods, touch, or, in my case, even certain objects can cause major reactions. Also, as I said, mental ailments can also plague us easier and more intensely. Those on the spectrum tend to feel emotions much stronger than neurotypical people, and this does include happiness alongside the negative. And when making autistic characters, you should keep these things in mind, as it will help the reader/watcher relate to the character. But also, there are instances of where those on the spectrum may feel feel emotions less intensely when it comes to emotions or empathy, like in the case of Donatello in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in Rise of the TMNT. However, keep in mind that autism is a spectrum, so not all will have the same things. Stimming. Stimming is a term used to describe actions taken by those on the spectrum when faced with overstimulation or understimulation. It's a way to try and calm the nerves or expel out excess energy in response to stimuli of all sorts. Take an example from Steven Universe about the character Pearl. Pearl is a character that many on the spectrum relate to, and for good reason. But what I want to highlight is her stimming, with her stimming being movement most of the time, with others being shown as well. Only time she doesn't is when she's completely relaxed and in her element. However, when faced with overwhelming things, she sims, as do I. Like in my case, I have a tendency to hit stuff. Hit like my leg, my arms, pretty much anything I can hit without majorly hurting myself, I will hit it. And that's not me, and it's not really something you can really control. And I've had people in the past say, why are you hitting yourself? Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Stop being bad. And that's unfortunately something a lot of people deal with when it comes to stimming. And of course, that isn't to say I haven't got annoyed by someone else's stimming. It's a complicated thing to deal with. But when it comes to autistic characters, if they are faced with things that are overwhelming, such as noise, emotion, etc., do consider what they would do in response to cope with these things. It doesn't need to be a constant thing to be shown, but something to be shown nonetheless, especially if it is something crucial to the character. Special interests. This is something that you absolutely need to have your characters have, if they are going to be believable as someone who is on the spectrum. Because special interests are integral to those who are on the spectrum. Special interests are things that those on the spectrum have particular insight or skill in, or as the name says, interest. With it being something that they are masters of their craft in. For example, for me, a handful of my special interests include writing, D&D, the ocean, and dinosaurs. Those on the spectrum are masters of their respective crafts and that can have skills and knowledge that far exceed the average person in comparison. And when writing that, you should make sure to reflect that fact, with my favorite use being implementing their interests into the plot. For example, maybe they have an interest in history and able to discern important plot details from that knowledge. Maybe they're a linguist that can easily pick up on languages that allows them to translate something that is integral to the story. And that's kind of where this fun of special interests come into the story. Or you can even just use it for good old fun. Because ultimately a special interest is usually a fun thing for those who are on the spectrum. Standing out. As you can imagine, being neurodivergent, we have a tendency to stand out. Whether in a positive or negative way, it's something that can be used when it comes to autistic characters in a very positive way. And of course, if you want to, negative way as well, but that's not that I wouldn't advise it. But the reason why I say it is that it presents opportunity to show that while different, it doesn't make those on the spectrum bad just because of difference. Sometimes we just embrace our weirdness and wear it proudly, which can be an empowering thing if done right. But sometimes that difference can haunt us on the spectrum like a phantom, with constant reminders of difference being bombarded at us. Frankly, it is exhausting to be in a world that doesn't feel like we belong there at times. However, one thing that writers don't do is that they make too much of a spectacle. Basically, what I mean is that autism is often used for spectacle. For me personally, society as a whole puts neurodivergent people on a bit of a pedestal, but also they put them down due to their standing out. While an autistic character can and often does stand out, you shouldn't let the standing out be the entire focus of the character. As I mentioned, society has put autism on a bit of a pedestal. It is a common thing for neurotypical writers to write characters who are autistic to be on this pedestal, often excelling in their field, but not excelling at what is considered normal. And while it is true we are masters of our crafts, to say that autism is this superpower is extremely harmful, and it isn't just in the direction of superpower either. There's also a pedestal of autism being this normal life-ending thing that makes people unable to be a part of society. Oh no, they're autistic. They can't be normal. They can't have a romantic life. They can't have this. They can't have that. They can't. They fucking can't. And that really, as you can tell, it really irritates me. And while some on the spectrum may not have as much capability as others, there needs to be better showing of the reality of what the situation is with those on the spectrum. And the reality is that we are not on these, pedestals of either being excelling superheroes or, people that are just shunned from society completely. While those do exist, they are not the norm and should not be treated as such. And then we come to infantilization and neurotypical helping, with big air quotes. When it comes to those on the spectrum, they are often treated differently to the point of others treating them in an infantile manner, with neurotypical characters having to guide neurodivergent characters. As in, neurodivergent character doesn't know X, Y, and Z, so therefore they need guide from a neurotypical person who will show them X, Y, and Z. And this is incredibly damaging, as it paints a bad picture of those who are on the spectrum. It makes those who are on the spectrum look inept or stupid in some cases, which is not okay. And when it comes to many writers, they will use being on the spectrum as a crutch for a lack of awareness in many places, leading to scenarios where characters will constantly hurt or not be aware of different things. And while there can be and often is a lack of awareness in certain places and times, it's not as prevalent or damning as many writers write it to be. We may not be completely aware of all things, but that doesn't mean we're stupid, and it should not be treated as such. Which in those writers' minds, it means that they need a neurotypical character to help and guide the character constantly. Society as a whole has a very degrading view of those on the spectrum, as they think those on the spectrum won't succeed because of it. And often will say things like, "Oh, this person succeeds in spite of them having autism." And I'm gonna say this in no mince terms. Do not do this. Please, for the love of everything that is holy, do not do this. If you want to see examples of this, look at The Good Doctor. That's a famous example due to the "I am a surgeon" meme and scene. That whole show irritates me to a level I cannot fully describe, and I'm not going to get into. Otherwise, this video is going to turn into a huge rant. So, now that we've gone through that, I want to highlight some famous autistic figures that you may or may not have heard of. Starting with Dan Harmon, who is the writer behind Community and Rick and Morty. He was diagnosed later in life, and actually is the same case for another person on this list. But he suspected that he was autistic when he was writing the autistic character of the name escapes me, but it was a character on Community, and he also wrote in that Rick from Rick and Morty would be autistic as well. And while I wouldn't say Rick would be a good example of an autistic character, it is cool to see that bit of confirmation. Then we got Dan Aykroyd, who is the writer and creator and one of the major stars of the Ghostbusters franchise. And yes, he is autistic, and his combined special interests of law enforcement and the paranormal are actually what led to him creating Ghostbusters. Then we have Sir Anthony Hopkins, who most famously starred in Silence of the Lambs, if you're familiar with that movie. And he was diagnosed later in life as well. I don't remember when exactly he was diagnosed, but he was diagnosed later in life. And his special interest is acting, and it's one reason why he is such a well-known actor, because of how seriously he takes the craft. And then we've got Satoshi Tajiri, who is the creator of Pokemon. And his special interest led him to creating Pokemon because as a little kid, he had a very particular interest in collecting bugs and other little critters, which led to the creation of Pokemon. And then we have Daryl Hannah from Kill Bill, who is also on the spectrum. And with that, let's go ahead and go to our conclusion. So, one thing I want you to take away from this is that, like any other person and any other character, people on the spectrum are wholly unique. And the best advice I can give, besides research through reading and videos, is to interact and ask questions with those on the spectrum. I just happen to be lucky enough to have first-hand experience. And if you enjoyed that video, why don't you give me a like? Go ahead and give me a like, send out a comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and as you can see above me, come join me in the Twitch chat to see the live recordings of study notes, and to catch some Q&A that we'll be doing on this stream. And with that, I'm gonna have to tune out. See ya.